Hello, my name is Samuel Martin, and I will be doing my final presentation on the effects that third shift has on police officers. A little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and psychology. So for me, there's a lot of interest in the effects that policing can have on a human being. To add to it, my father was a police officer for 30 years, and I also had the opportunity of working over 500 hours as a police intern, and I got to see firsthand what third shift did to many of the officers. Moving forward, policing is one of the most stressful jobs in the United States. This is due to the fact that police officers are literally told to make life and death situation or decisions on a daily basis, and deciding, who lives, who dies, what's the best decision to make in the most stressful kind of situations that involve human life. Police are held to a high standard, creating need for flexibility. Police officers are, when they're given this responsibility of life and death, they're expected to abide by the rules more so than everyday citizens, and it does not allow them to break any laws or to live outside the lines, and it creates this need for the best of the best when it comes to policing. And because of the demands of the job, there's not a lot of room for flexibility. There are several findings in several different studies that working the jobs can have long-lasting effects on the mental health of police officers, and it really doesn't help that police officers aren't allowed to have mental illnesses, and because of this, they cannot reach out for help to solve their mental illnesses because they are afraid to lose their job or won't be allowed to hold a gun, or even the community will have some kind of strike back if they hear local officers are dealing with mental health problems. Next, to fully understand what police go through on their shifts and the different shifts, it's important to know the history of shifts. First, there was in the early 1600s to 1700s, there was watch systems. This was just comprised of different civilians taking pride in their communities, and at night they would sit and they would watch the town, make sure nothing went wrong. There was no fires or any bad people entering the town. The only problem with this is that it was civilians. They weren't trained, and many times they would fall asleep or even get drunk or, party with the other watchers. So it wasn't really the best system to begin with. Then there became constables. They watched over the towns and regions, so similar to sheriffs. And again, these people were asked to stay up late hours of the night to watch over the community, and it led to corruption with money and alcohol and falling asleep, not doing their duties. So there was early problems. Then there was the slave patrol, in which men would watch the slaves and keep them from running away. But things really started to turn in the 1830s when police departments started to get organized. There was rules set, there was regulations, there was more than one shift, and the nation, instead of governing themselves, asked for professionals and asked for the very best of their communities to protect them and uphold the laws. We move on to some effects of the third shift on the human body. There's what's called the synthetic rhythm. That is the part of your brain that tells you when to go to sleep and when to rest, and when your brain needs to rest and when your body needs to rest. And when people work the third shift, they lose this and it becomes out of order, and it makes it hard for people to fall asleep. We have what's occupational stress. When a person is tired and they go to work and work becomes stressful because they are tired and they're trying real hard not to fall asleep, or whatever's going on with them that builds up inside of them, that then causes them to lose sleep. So because they're losing sleep, they have stress at work, and that stress at work causes them to lose more sleep, and it's a continuous cycle that happens over and over and over again. Next is an increased risk of cancer. This will be further explained later with research done on nurses, but the effects that were found on the nurses that worked the third shift were very similar to ones that affect police officers. Next, there a deeper look into the study that spoke about the cancer effects. The night shift work and risk of colorectal cancer in nurses' health study. This was a study done in the early or late 1980s and early 1990 or late 1990s that took a look at nurses that were working the third or night shift for an extended period of time, and the authors determined this as 10 to 15 years. It was a longitudinal study of these nurses. Like mentioned, it went from 1988 to 1998. Overall, it went across the whole nation. It's followed 80,000 nurses, and the effects that it had on their bodies and the long-term health effects that it was having on them. For many, this was a huge step going forward because it was more than just the mental effects that it was having on the nurses. It was looking at the long-term physical effects it was having on them. On to the research methods of this study. As it was stated, it was a basic longitudinal study, so it followed the nurses in two separate groups. The group of those nurses that did not work the 10 to 15 years of the third shift, and the group that did, and it followed them after their careers for about 10 years to see if they they produced or developed this type of cancer. As I stated, there was two control groups. The group of women that did not work the 10 to 15 years on the third shift, and then the group of women that did work 10 to 15 years from about 8 p.m. to about 6 a.m. the next day. Again, this was a nationwide study. It followed about 80,000 women from all over the United States of America, from the Northeast to the Southeast. It wanted to create a wide population with a lot of variety to it, and so that there gave more validity to the results that the authors found. The results the authors end up finding supported the claim that the women that worked the third shift or night shift for an extended period of time in their career, causing more stress on their lives, were more likely to have the colorectal cancer. What they ended up finding is 602 of the women that worked the third shift were found with colorectal cancers. The author's statistics and data found that this created a 1.0 correlation, which is also known in the mathematical world as a very strong correlation. And they used their data to find a 95% confidence rate that this is correct. So by just looking at these results, it shows that there is a definite correlation or cause and effect seen with working the third shift and developing colorectal cancer for women working extended period of time on the third shift. The authors then give a conclusion on their paper that there is a strong correlation between the third shift and the forms of cancer. They found that the stress that this shift and the lack of the sleep and the cause that it was having on the brain and the rest of the body was causing something to malfunction in the body to overproduce cells, and it was causing these women to develop a form of cancer. Working the third shift for an extended period of time can cause long-lasting effects instead of just acute effects. Many times the focus on the third shift in their studies is on the psychological effects, the lack of sleep, the socialization aspects, and now this study placed a view on the shifts in the studies that it's no longer just what it's doing to the brain, but what it's doing to the body as a whole. And finally, employers are now liable for shift maintenance. It is now up to the employers to make sure that they do not place this amount of stress and strain, that it has this effect on the bodies of their employees by switching up the people that work the third shift and not placing employees in their careers for 14, 15 years working a third shift. Some other notes to take away from this study and how it applies to police officers is according to a study done by the FBI that took a look at all police departments, over half the police departments in the U.S. have less than 10 officers to a department. That means to evenly distribute the officers between the three shifts, there would be about 3 officers a shift. That being said, it does not give much wiggle room for an officer to move around. If most times shifts are done by seniority, the older officers taking first shift, the officers with some seniority taking second shift, and the youngest officers taking third. It is very, very hard for third shift officers to find other officers to work for them in such a small department. So it leads them to working long periods of time, like these nurses, on the third shift. Going back to the occupational stress, the longer and longer they work, they continue into the cycle of losing the synthetic rhythm, and it causing them more and more stress and more sleep loss. And then finally, the mental and physical effects. Police departments need to find a way to protect officers from themselves and to protect officers from the third shift by finding ways to help them with their mental and physical health. Finally, the author's long-term conclusions. Shift variation is very important. It not only gives the officer more experience and gives them more of the community feel with community policing, allowing them to see more and more people. And it's important for their health as well. And the officers receive enough mental effects from their jobs. They do not need to work shifts that causes them physical harm as well. Mental health should be, if possible, should be provided. Not many departments can provide a psychologist or a mental health professional for help for police officers, but if they can, like the larger departments can, they should bring on a full-time psychologist or therapist to help officers with the mental side of things. And finally, third shift should not be a long-term position. There should be laws, there should be administration rules that prevent officers from working extended period of times on these shifts and causing them the physical harm that it is seen in many different studies.